question is, are you ready?
What do you guys want to talk about?
Let me talk to you. Yeah.
Throwdown Nation, we are live. It is a Wednesday night. We are rolling on Instagram, on YouTube, on Twitter/X, on Facebook, and on Twitch. It is episode 130 of the Throwdown, and tonight we are throwing down with Connecticut-based pro wrestling referee Nick Mitchell. Aside from being a ref, he is also the director of talent relations for Pure Vanguard Wrestling. How you doing tonight, Nick?
I'm great, Matt. How are you?
Man, I can't complain. It's been a good day, and you know, any day you can start and finish above ground is all right by me.
I agree.
So, for those of you that are watching this live, if you have questions or comments, just throw them in the chat and we'll either kind of handle them as we go or do a little Q&A at the end. So we'll go ahead and start with the first and the most obvious question, and that is, how long have you been involved in the wrestling business?
Fairly recently. I started training in December of 2024, strictly for referee training. I had my first show in February of 2025, so it's really only been a few months, but I really hit the ground running, I guess. Got you.
So who actually trained you as a referee?
So I currently still train at Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling in East Haven, Connecticut with Paul Roma and Mario Mancini.
Got you. So did you aspire or do you aspire at all to actually wrestle?
Short answer is no. I guess the longer answer would be, in my other role as head of talent relations for Pure Vanguard, if the storyline situation ever calls for it, in a very limited capacity, maybe. But I'm a referee.
Gotcha. I don't blame you.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the training to be a referee, what would you say was the most difficult aspect of professional wrestling refereeing for you to wrap your mind and body around?
I would say the positioning, being there and present in a match while also being as out of the way as possible for whoever's in the ring.
Right.
The referee is the third person in the ring at all times. So you don't want to get in anybody's way, but you're also a part of the match as well. Got you.
So how did the opportunity with Pure Vanguard come about? Tell us the story of that. I'm intrigued.
For sure. So one of the owners, Warren Corson, I went to high school with in Bristol, Connecticut, and he and his father had started Pure Vanguard about a year ago now, and I saw that they were doing their shows. I thought it was really cool. It aligned kind of with my re-interest in wrestling. And so this past fall, I just decided to reach out to them after one of their shows, kind of just saying, how have you been? It's really awesome that you're doing that. How can I help? Just want to get involved in some way. And so that started as, just being on hard cam for their next show. Show after that, it was one of their roaming camera guys. And then it kind of turned into, can I be a referee? What does that take? And then really it was just the decision to really kind of just jump in and go to wrestling school. That was really what got the ball rolling on that.
Gotcha. Speed round.
Sure.
Seth Rollins.
My favorite wrestler.
Yep. That guy is immensely talented, and and I mean, he's not old, but he's not a spring chicken in the business anymore. And to still be operating at the level he's operating is impressive. I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
It's interesting. I have a lot of young wrestlers that come on the show, and I always ask them, have you taken the time to watch the old Tyler Black stuff from the Indies and Ring of Honor and such? And a lot of them haven't. And I've like, you've only seen the WWE version of him. You've got to see the rest of it.
For sure. And even like pre-knee injury, Seth Rollins was a wild wrestler.
Yeah.
Not that he's not now, but
no. But
pre-knee injury.
I mean, yeah. He was a different animal. So, we were talking a little bit before we went on the air, and it's your fandom is deeply rooted. What would you say is your earliest wrestling related memory?
Earliest, I would say, is the WCW Cruiserweight division of like 1996, 1997, something like that. So like Rey Mysterio, Juventud Guerrero, even like Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, like that was probably my first memory. Even though I grew up more watching WWF back then, my earliest memories are WCW.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's well, like we were talking, I've been a fan since I was around 11, which was the early 1980s. Mm-hmm. And so my earliest feud that I remember watching as a kid, watching Florida Championship Wrestling with Gordon Soley doing the commentary back in the day, was actually Dusty Rhodes and Kevin Sullivan. And when you're 11 years old, Kevin Sullivan was a scary dude because he had the whole satanic gimmick going on and the Army of Darkness and all of that. And, he played that gimmick well. And, when you're 11, man, like I said, that was some scary stuff. You find out later Kevin Sullivan was a total sweetheart behind the scenes,
right.
But yeah, man. And you were mentioning Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, and I am still to this day a huge Chris Benoit mark. I mean, it's terrible way that he came to his end. But I can separate the man's resume of work from the human being and how he ended up, and I will still, openly say Chris Benoit was one of the best to ever do it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Technically, between the ropes. Yeah.
Oh
One
yeah.
of the best to ever do it. Yeah.
Terrible human being, great wrestler. So,
Right. Yeah.
but so away from wrestling, what are some of your other hobbies and interests?
So I'm currently playing in a 35 and up baseball league. I could just never get into playing softball. I grew up playing baseball. Um, Found a league around me. This is my first year trying to balance doing baseball and wrestling at the same time. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that more than this season physically.
Right.
Outside of that, my wife and I are big marks for Disney, so we go down there, as often as we can. And we have our first child coming over in September, so I'm sure that'll be taking up a lot of my interest and time once that happens.
Oh yeah. Well, I can tell you there is nothing like being a dad. Um, I've got an almost 16-year-old son, and soak it all in because the time flies.
Yeah,
I mean, it's and it's amazing how quickly it flies. So
for sure. Yeah.
but man, it is the best occupation. So I'm thrilled for you, man.
Thank you.
That is definitely exciting. So we're mostly a wrestling related show, but we do dabble a little bit into pop culture, and I'm
Okay.
always looking for recommendations. So by any chance, are you watching or listening to anything cool right now?
Wow. I can't say I'm watching any shows right now. I In the last year or so, my interests and attention span has shifted more from shows to reading lately.
Hmm.
So I've been reading a lot of books. Um, if the most recent season of The Last of Us had been any better, I'm sure I would have still been watching that. But I, like most other people, I think we watched the first episode of season 2 and kind of stopped.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that show really kind of lost its way.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
So, so, but so outside of wrestling, what person inspires you the most and why?
Oof. Man. I mean, I grew up uh, a really big fan of the Kennedys. Um, my first go around in college, I wrote my senior thesis on Robert Kennedy Sr. Um, as working for the CDC, his son isn't as isn't as great as the father was, but yeah, Robert Kennedy Sr. in particular has been my idol for the past like 10 years or so.
Gotcha, gotcha. Speed round.
Mhm.
Nick Patrick.
Heel
Yeah,
referee.
heel referee. Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, he was he was in the NWO's pocket.
Yes.
Good ref though.
Yes.
So, what does your family think about you deciding to try your hand with refereeing and actually working for an up and coming wrestling company? How do they feel about your ventures?
Um, my parents just wanted me to not get injured,
Right.
especially once they found out they had a grandchild coming along. Um, my wife is supportive. She, especially on the WWE level, like we watch it together every week. Um, indie wrestling is, you know, a little different than the pro level, especially, you know, once you get to like the smaller level indie promotions that, like, you know, maybe aren't as polished. So it's a little harder to get her interest there, but she listens whenever I go on and on talking about it.
Gotcha. So you mentioned that your hometown is Bristol, Connecticut.
Mhm.
What is your favorite thing about Bristol?
Hmm. I guess since it's the home of ESPN, that's probably my favorite thing about it. You know, since I work there, I grew up wanting to work at ESPN, you know, just growing up a sports fan. Um, yeah, there's not too much else great about Central Connecticut.
Gotcha. So, you know, being a referee is obviously different than being a wrestler, but referees do have their own persona and their own personality. So tell us a bit about in-ring Nick Mitchell and kind of compare and contrast him with everyday you.
I would say in-ring Nick Mitchell is more authoritative than out-of-ring Nick. Um, yeah, he's more willing to get in between two people beating the hell out of each other than out-of-ring Nick would be. Yeah, that's probably the biggest difference. Yeah.
Gotcha. So tell us about the first match you officiated. How did it go? What were your thoughts going into it? Thoughts coming out of it? Let's hear about the very first one that you were the man in.
For sure. So my first show, I almost hesitate to count it because it was before I started training, and most reputable companies won't take on a referee who's not trained at all. But my first, and I don't remember on that show what my first actual match was, but the first show in general, um, doing it, you know, about a month or so before I started training, and being, I would say, good at it. I was like, wow, I can do this. Like I can actually, I want to go through and do this for real. You know, it kind of like just solidified my decision to go through with it. Had it gone terribly, you know, maybe I would have reconsidered. You know, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I can help out in other ways. But I feel like I picked it up pretty quickly just from, you know, watching it since I was a kid and being attentive to it. Yeah, that was probably my biggest takeaway from my first match, my first event.
Gotcha. So you know, we've heard about the first one. Now tell us about your favorite match that you have been a part of so far.
Okay. Um, so this one will be from my most recent show. So for Pure Vanguard Wrestling, where like you said, I also act as their head of talent relations. We our most recent show, we were crowning our company's inaugural champion. So we started the show with 4 singles matches, and those 4 winners were meeting in the main event after, you know, a couple other matches in between. And I put together 2 young, talented wrestlers from my school, Paradise Alley, Corey Duke and Jeremy Lacroix. And I told them, like, just, you know, you guys are getting, you know, 15, 20 minutes, just go and do your thing. And they did. And it was the best wrestling match that I've been a part of. And I'm just glad I was the one to put it together, because they, despite being at the same school and, you know, doing shows in the same area, they had not gone one-on-one before. So I was glad that I was able to make that happen, and I was able to referee it and see it firsthand.
Very cool. Yeah, actually, not terribly long ago, I actually had Corey Duke's partner, Algo Nelly, on the
Yes.
show, and they were both supposed to be on, but Corey had some technical problems that night, so I just ended up with Nelly. But I had a great time with them. They are both good people.
Oh yeah, they're both great people, and obviously fantastic wrestlers.
For sure, for sure. So, you know, in your time as a referee, have you had the opportunity to take a ref bump yet?
Yes, twice so far. My first one a few weeks ago, I ate a super kick, which was great. Troy Stevens, shout out to you. He placed it right where he needed to. I didn't feel a thing except for, you know, taking the bump.
Right.
And then a couple weeks ago, I took a spear from the 300-pound Patrick Saint, and he delivered it perfectly. I probably got myself a little more airtime than I needed, so I definitely came crashing down harder than I was bracing myself for. But it worked out because I had to be like out for the rest of the match.
Yeah.
So I eventually rolled out of the ring. The other ref came in, finished the match, and then, you know, I got to keep kayfabe. So I stayed on the floor unconscious until all the fans left after the show, because that was the last match.
Nice. So good sell job.
Yes.
So, and you know, it's been my experience doing these that everybody has them, and it's always interesting to hear what each person's is. So, what is your biggest wrestling pet peeve?
Not washing your gear is big. Less so for me because I'm not grappling with them, but you know, it's kind of common courtesy. Not everyone does it though. And then just being, you know, professional, and you know, if you're kind of in it for yourself and not, you know, being respectful for the locker room or, you know, whoever you're working with, you know, that I would say that's a big pet peeve. And especially as a booker for Pure Vanguard, I only book talent that I think will be good in the locker room, because I want that specifically. I want a good locker room.
Yeah, I mean, if your locker room is a mess, everything's a mess. So, speed round. Kenny Omega.
Top 5 all time. I personally can't get into them.
Really?
And I don't know why.
Interesting.
Great wrestler though.
Yeah. I think to some extent he's kind of an acquired taste personality wise. I mean, it took me a while to really fully appreciate him. So
yeah, and like I said, it's not any of the in-ring stuff, but yeah, maybe his wrestling personality, maybe I'm just not a huge fan of.
Got you. So, from your perspective as a referee and also, you know, in company management, in your opinion, is it more important that a talent be great in the ring or great on the mic?
On the independent level, I would say in the ring, because a lot of indie shows, there aren't any promos during a show. And if they can't cut a great one or don't cut one on their socials for your show, you know, I would take them being great in the ring over promo skills. But once you get up to the corporate level, where there's the television product involved, you have to be able to talk. You have to be able to cut a promo, and if you don't, you have to have something that really makes up for it. Because a lot of people can wrestle, and even the really great ones, if they can't talk at all, it's going to hamper their career.
Gotcha. So, do you have an all-time favorite match as a fan? A match that's like comfort food. You just find yourself gravitating back to it, and it just feels like home.
I would say, based on the era that I grew up, it would be the first two TLC matches.
Oh yeah,
I grew up loving the Hardy Boys. So yeah, those two matches. From the current product, or more recently, there was a triple threat a few years back, or well, probably about 10 years ago now, almost. It was Seth Rollins, Brock Lesnar, and John Cena. I want to say it was at the Royal Rumble. I could be wrong though. And that was one of the better matches, particularly multi-man matches that I had ever seen. And going down to NXT, Cesaro and Sami Zayn, it was, I can watch that one over and over again.
Yeah. And, like we were talking about with Seth Rollins and Tyler Black, with Sami Zayn, you gotta look at the El Generico stuff from his indie days, to get that aspect of him. And it's really just cool having the internet and the ability to look back on all of that stuff, because otherwise you're really shortchanging yourself if you don't see all of that and really have a full grasp of what that person can do.
Oh, for sure.
So piggybacking onto that question, do you have an all-time favorite promo as a fan?
All-time favorite promo. Man. I mean, for lack of thinking one off the top of my head, I would default to the pipe bomb, the original CM Punk one, just because I can't think of another one off the top of my head. But I wouldn't really call it a promo necessarily, but the little like promo vignette where Vince McMahon introduces the NWO into the WWF, like, injecting it with a lethal dose of poison.
Yeah.
I don't know why, just the way he delivers it I just loved it. So those are my two.
Yeah. A promo that I really, sort of getting onto the subject of promos, having grown up back in the territory days and such, I am a big fan of the promo style of Jake the Snake Roberts, because he would rarely raise his voice. He would just quietly tell you what he was going to do to you. And in many ways, that's scarier than somebody ranting and raving with the veins popping out of their head. They say, fear the quiet ones. And, and somebody else that really took that promo approach was Raven back in ECW. Again, he would just project quiet menace, and I've always dug that style, but one of my favorite promos, and it wasn't in that style, but was a promo that Mick Foley cut when he was in ECW. Somebody, at the time, his son Dewey was a little boy, and somebody out in the crowd held up a sign that said Kane Dewey. And just the pain and the anger that sign aroused within Mick Foley was on display. And I mean, that was a very real, very relatable promo. And that's on my promo Mount Rushmore. Just the realism of that, you could feel how it must have felt to see somebody advocating for the caning of your child. I mean,
Yeah. Going back to the Jake the Snake type promo, we have a guy in the Connecticut area, Ryan Frost, and his promos, he has that like low, like velvety kind of deep voice, and he doesn't need to yell, but when he does, the very few times that he does, it means something versus just yelling at the top of your lungs for the whole promo, like the Ultimate Warrior or something.
Yeah. So in your opinion, who are the best male and female wrestlers in the world right now? And I'm talking not within a particular company. Who's the best man and the best woman in the business right now?
Wow. Putting everything together, man. On the women's side, just for everything that she can do in and out of the ring, I would say Rhea Ripley's got to be up there. And then on the men's side, I could default back to Seth Rollins. But I mean, there's 20 people you can name very quickly, and they would all make sense.
Oh yeah. I don't feel like he is quite to the level of being the guy yet, but somebody who I really feel like the sky is the limit right now is Jacob Fatu.
I love Jacob Fatu.
Man, he is just phenomenal, and I really feel like I said, the sky's the limit, and I'm glad that they've kind of taken the leash off of him and just let him be what he is, because he is an entertainer.
Seth Rollins is my favorite overall wrestler, but Jacob Fatu is my favorite current in the moment wrestler.
Yeah. And I am absolutely dying to see him get to mix it up with Braun Breaker. I think those two guys, that's going to be insane when that happens.
Yeah, that'll be a WrestleMania main event.
Yeah,
in like a year or two.
No doubt. And you were talking about Rhea Ripley. I'm a huge fan of hers as well, and now that she is in the WWE system, I am dying to see Rhea Ripley work a program with Jordynne Grace. I think those two could tear the house down. I mean, two very powerful women. I mean, I think that's going to be some really good stuff when that happens. So, if you were a wrestler, and this can be present day or past, if you were a wrestler, who would be a dream opponent? Who would you love to have the opportunity to share a ring with as an opponent?
Early 2000s Jeff Hardy, just because that was my guy growing up as a kid. We would just be jumping off of stuff, flipping around. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, early 2000s Jeff Hardy.
Yeah. We were talking on last night's show. We were talking actually for a little bit about Jeff Hardy, and how, you know, to some extent, the new age Jeff Hardy is Darby Allin, but in many respects, though, Darby Allin has taken Jeff Hardy to like a whole other level. I mean, he's Darby Allin's just a madman. I mean, he makes there are times he makes Jeff Hardy look like Captain Safety.
I'm just glad he hasn't gotten like seriously hurt with some of the bumps that he willingly chooses to take.
Absolutely. Speed round.
Mhm.
Earl Hebner.
The GOAT.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. You know, I still wonder and would love to know the whole truth of the Montreal Screwjob story. What really and truly happened? You know, because I mean, that is one of the great stories in the history of the business, just in terms of you can just speculate on that for hours and hours, and you know, and he was so, you know, tied up with all of that mess that it would just be interesting to know what the whole truth of the situation was.
And you know, maybe, you know, there was a chance, you know, maybe with Vince out of the picture that maybe more of it would come out, but you know, now with Triple H and Shawn kind of running the main and developmental levels, I don't think that's coming out anytime soon.
No, I don't either. And you know, it really, I mean, to me, it is just such an interesting thing, and the irony is not lost on me that the two main figures of D-Generation X are now running the company. I mean, you know, that's just wild. I mean,
if you had said that back in 1997, no one would believe that.
No. But you know, they have matured into their roles very nicely, and they are both doing amazing work. So, but yeah, the irony is just huge, though. It really and truly is.
Yeah.
But it is so, in many ways, though, it is just so typical of wrestling. I mean, that those two guys would end up eventually, being in charge. So, so, you know, in terms of your fandom and you know, to some extent your refereeing and such, what is your favorite wrestling move? What is a move that you just really enjoy seeing executed well? And you know, is there something that just brings a smile to your face when?
As a referee, I like a good abdominal stretch, particularly with a heel giving it. You know, really just like digging into the rib cage, and then as the referee's getting closer to check on things, you know, maybe the heel grabs the rope to gain extra leverage.
Yep.
An abdominal stretch, because if you were to do that to somebody as a shoot, that would hurt a lot.
Oh yeah. And you know, it's unfortunate you don't see that move nearly as much as you used to. But I mean, you know, back in the in the territory days, it was all over the place. You know, you saw it all the time. But nowadays, you really don't see it as much. And you know, I've brought this topic up a few times on here. You know, going back to being a Jake Roberts mark, I have hated seeing the DDT get relegated to being a mid-match setup move as opposed to a finisher. Because, you know, when Jake would do the DDT, you would think he murdered a man. I mean, but now it's just a setup move for other things. You really don't see it as a finisher anymore, and and it kind of hurts my heart because
Yeah, I mean, I guess the best way of looking at it, and I think Jake has said this himself, is like, that's because nobody can do a DDT like I can.
right.
I can put people
right.
away with mine, and
Yeah.
you can't put people away with yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what is the most important lesson that your time so far working in the professional wrestling business has taught you?
Um, a little bit of respect and gratitude goes a long way in that business. Yeah, and the best stability is availability for a lot of shows.
Absolutely. Speed round. Finn Balor.
Always hurts my heart. He should be one of the top guys in the company.
Agreed.
Yeah, they totally killed the demon gimmick, to where I don't know if they could successfully bring it back, especially to the levels that it was in NXT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like he is, over the years he has been in the WWE system. I feel like he has been, through various circumstances, one of the most mismanaged talents.
Mm-hmm.
And, I feel like, after that injury that forced him to relinquish the Universal title, I don't feel like he ever really fully bounced back from that, just in terms of getting to where he deserves to be. I mean,
yeah, I agree. And, had he not gotten injured, who knows how things would have turned out.
right.
It's too bad that it had to happen, especially, the night that he wins the title.
I know.
Yeah, and at this point, I don't know if they trust him to be a top guy, even though it was just the one injury.
I know. It's just, it's just so unfortunate, because, immensely talented guy.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's just gotten some bad breaks.
Yeah, I am looking forward to seeing what they do, post Judgment Day, because it looks like that's gonna, kind of run its course soon, or at least maybe split up into two different factions or whatever it might be. Once that runs its course, I would love to see him on his own again. Don't bring back like a budget Bullet Club. Don't be just like one guy in a group. Hopefully be, the guy Finn Balor again. But we'll see.
Yeah. I'm hoping we don't see like Judgment Day Purple and Black and Judgment Day Wolfpack or something.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. That wouldn't be great.
no, not at all. So, what is your take on the role that social media is playing as a promotional tool in wrestling, specifically indie wrestling?
It's your lifeline a lot of times, especially if you're trying to get work outside of your little network of wherever you happen to grow up or go to wrestling school in. 20 25 years ago, when indie wrestling just like wasn't as big, it's probably because there wasn't that readily available way of marketing yourself to a larger audience that wouldn't see you otherwise, because I'm not, even in Connecticut, I'm not going to know people that wrestle in, Western New York, but because of social media, I can, and I can follow companies that otherwise I would never have known about, never worked for. Yeah, and for young wrestlers, especially ones that are trying to get shows outside of your area, you have to have a good social media presence.
Absolutely. So, do you have any pre-show traditions? Any things that you try to do consistently before you walk out to work a match?
Um, I try to not eat much before shows, which also comes back to bite me afterwards, because usually after a show I'm not hungry either. Like I just can't eat, and so the next day I'm like dying by the time I wake up. Outside of that, I just have a very particular way of putting on my referee outfit. My most recent show with Pure Vanguard was the first where I've also had to like kind of give like the pre-show locker room talk. So like that kind of threw me off a little bit because I'm not used to doing that. But it'll just be another, thing that I add into my pre-show rituals for that company in particular.
Got you. Got you. Speed round.
Mm-hmm.
Aubrey Edwards.
Divisive. People who don't like her they really don't like her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's definitely polarizing for sure.
Yeah, some wrestlers and fans don't like what they perceive to be the referee making it about them.
Right.
And to a certain extent I can agree with that. But she's also a talented referee.
Gotcha. So, something that we've done in all of these that's just been kind of fun is we've let the current guest pose a question for the next guest.
Okay.
And so a previous guest was a wrestler from Orlando, Florida, by the name of Max Danziger. And interestingly enough, Max, aside from being an indie wrestler, is also the drummer for the band Set It Off. So he sort of divides his life between being on tour with the band and then, being at home doing indie wrestling, which is really an interesting lifestyle.
Yeah.
But the question that he posed is, this is more of a wrestler perspective, but if you could snap your fingers and be able to do any move that you currently can't do, what move would it be? What would you love to be able to do?
A picture perfect moonsault.
Gotcha.
For whatever reason, anytime I try a backflip or a moonsault, I always like kind of go off to the side. I don't know if it's like my brain trying to protect myself from jumping backwards to something that I can't see. But doing a really, really nice moonsault would be cool.
Gotcha. So since this is part of a series, do you have a question that you would like to pose to the next guest? And I can go ahead and tell you the next guest tomorrow night at 7 p.m. I've got wrestler and ECW original C.W. Anderson. So no pressure, but
Wow.
so is there a question that you would like to pose to C.W. Anderson?
Man, if there was one bump in your career that you could take back, what would it be?
Oh, that is a really good question. I like that. That will be definitely an interesting one to get his take on.
Yeah.
So, We had talked a bit before we went on the air. You were wanting to talk a bit about, I think you called it the AIWF, sort of a movement to kind of bring back the territories. Tell us about that.
The company that I work for, Pure Vanguard Wrestling, just struck a deal with the AIWF to become one of their territories. And like we were talking about earlier, they really strive to be like the modern day NWA. I know the NWA currently still exists, but in the way that it used to back in the 70s and 80s, where there are territories that all recognize a world champion at the highest level, and that champion can go from territory to territory, defend their belt, and especially nowadays in the social media age, this like cross promotion of companies that, if they weren't under the same umbrella of the AIWF, it would be companies that would never, potentially know about each other. Maybe do like talent sharing or, a cross-branded show. And I'm just glad that in what little way that I'm doing it, that I can be a part of that.
Absolutely. So we're getting toward the end of things now. So do you have any upcoming shows or anything at all that you'd like to give some hype to?
Yes. So my home school, Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling, during the summer months, we do outdoor shows at a local brewery. So I have a show coming up this Sunday at Armada Brewing Company in New Haven, Connecticut. The week after that, I have a show for Outcast Wrestling Revolution. That's going to be a benefit for Marine veterans called Till Valhalla. So I'm looking forward to doing that. Just for it being a benefit for veterans, and it'll also be my first show working with that company. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Nice. Well, as far as what we've got coming up here on the Throwdown, like I said, tomorrow night, 7 p.m., I've got episode 131 with C.W. Anderson. And then this coming Monday at 7 p.m., I've got episode 132 with a wrestler based out of South Carolina, Glitch in the Matrix Kilgore. And then this next Tuesday, also at 7 p.m., I've got episode 133 with a female wrestler based right here in Atlanta, Alexandra Quinn, the Crash Out Cutie. And she is, the Atlanta scene is really on fire right now. There are really 3 top-notch companies with a lot of talent, and it's definitely an exciting place to be. And Atlanta just has a great wrestling tradition anyway. But yeah, before we start really wrapping this up, do you have any final words or anything at all that you'd like to say to the audience?
I support indie wrestling. You're doing it now by watching this podcast, but attend as many wrestling shows as you can locally. Buy merch from the merch table. That's a lot of times. Wrestlers will make more off their merch sales for that day than they will, whatever their booked rate is. So,
right.
If you see somebody on a show that you like, look them up, follow them on their socials, see what they're doing. Really just supporting these people who at the independent level of wrestling are really doing it because they love doing it. It's not for the money.
No, because you and I both know that. There's a lot of truth to the old saying, the handshake and the hot dog.
Mm-hmm.
It's.
Yeah.
But for those of you that have been watching this live, thank you. For those of you that'll be seeing this on replays and such, thank you for that. If you like what we have going here, I've got a link tree in my Instagram bio that has the links to all of my various socials. So, please go to, all of them, do the old like, comment, share, and subscribe. And like I said, tomorrow evening, 7 p.m., it's me and C.W. Anderson. So I'm definitely excited to have him on and pick his brain and get some stories from the life of being an ECW original. I mean, I'm definitely honored to have this opportunity. It is really going to be cool to be able to delve into some of that with him. So
I'm going to have to watch some of his matches and see if I can guess what bump he would take back.
Yeah. His bump card is pretty full. But he's doing some really good work right now in MLW. He and Brock Anderson are, he's kind of taken Brock under his wing, and and it's good to see some of these old timers really still taking the opportunity to help the next generation along, and I'm definitely excited to get into all of that with him. But Nick, thank you for your time. This has been an absolute pleasure, and I'm definitely excited to see where things are going to go with Pure Vanguard. I think you guys, it sounds like y'all have something really special up there, and I wish you all of the best, and I also wish you the best personally as you prepare to transition to becoming a dad.
Thank you.
That's like I said, there's nothing like it, man. Do you know yet if it's going to be a boy or a girl?
It's a boy. Yeah.
Oh, nice. So, well, anyway, until tomorrow night, be good to each other, love each other, and let's keep throwing down.